We are forever wedded to the land. From that union, our communities are born. We are looking down on a piece of land that has nourished the growth of a city, Los Angeles, from a sleepy outpost of the Spanish Empire to a vigorous American metropolis. This piece of earth has kept a careful record of the past. If we look beneath its cracked and battered surface, we may discover much about our origins and perhaps some signs of our destiny. The story of this piece of land begins thousands of years ago, before civilized man set foot on it. A tribe of California Indians made their home on it. They were a peaceful people living in self-contained villages, each ruled by a single chief. The land sustained them. They hunted deer, antelope, and rabbits, and gathered plant foods. For shelter, they built domed huts, thatched with tule. Trade with the Serrano, a tribe living to the east, enriched their simple culture. The Gabrielino lived undisturbed on this land for about 9,000 years. Then, early in 1769, an energetic Spanish priest, Junipero Serra, began preparing an expedition that would end their way of life forever. The Portola Expedition was the spearhead of Spanish colonization of Alta California. It left Baja California in June and crossed the Los Angeles basin in midsummer. The party passed the La Brea tar pits and encountered an Indian village. Father Juan Crespi, another priest accompanying Portola, describes this encounter in his diary. We came to a village of this region, the people of which, on seeing us, came out into the road. They greeted us and wished to give us seeds, but we had nothing at hand in which to carry them. We did not accept them. Seeing this, they threw some handfuls of them on the ground and the rest into the air. The seeds which fell to the ground at this encounter flowered into the mission system in California. In 1771, the Mission San Gabriel was founded, followed by the Mission San Juan Capistrano in 1776, and the Mission San Fernando in 1797. Many of the Indians living in the Los Angeles basin were relocated to these three missions. They were taught Christianity and trained to work in the mission's kitchens and fields. During the mission period, the Pan Pacific land was considered communal. Cattle from the mission's herds roamed on it, and residents of the pueblo carried away brea, or tar, from the nearby swamp and used it to waterproof their dwellings. The land first became private property in 1828. Jose Antonio Carrillo, president of the Los Angeles Town Council, granted the land to Antonio Jose Rocha, a leading citizen of the pueblo. Rocha built corrals and pastured his stock on the Pan Pacific land, which became known as the Rancho La Brea. Gradually, the rancho system replaced the mission system as the basis of social and economic life of the region. The owners of the ranchos were the elite. They led a pleasant life, celebrating saints' days with fiestas and practicing their skills as horsemen. The manual labor on the ranchos was performed by the mission-trained Indians. Rocha allowed one other resident of the pueblo to pasture stock on the Rancho La Brea. He was a gringo named James Thompson. In 1851, Thompson built the Rancho Adobe, which still stands today. When Thompson built this adobe, the rancho period in Southern California was drawing to a close. The land was entering a new phase of American ownership. The first American to make commercial use of the land was Arthur F. Gilmore, who bought Thompson's share of the Rancho La Brea at a foreclosure sale. The Gilmore family moved into the adobe and operated a dairy farm on the land. In 1901, while drilling for water, Gilmore struck oil. Soon the landscape was dotted with oil derricks. Arthur's son, Earl, developed the company into the largest independent oil business in the West, the Gilmore Oil Company. In the 1920s, yielding to competition from Signal Hill and Long Beach, Gilmore's oil derricks began to disappear. In less than 30 years, the industrial phase of the Pan Pacific land was over. Gilmore turned his property to a new use. In 1934, he opened the farmers market. In 1938, he built Gilmore Stadium. And in 1939, the Hollywood stars began playing baseball on Gilmore Field. Now the people of Los Angeles could play on the Rancho La Brea. When the farmers market opened, the Depression had come to California. The local housing industry was in a terrible slump. A group of determined Los Angeles businessmen decided to stimulate the demand for homes by putting on a huge housing show. They leased 30 acres from Earl Gilmore and hired Clifford Henderson to stage the National Housing Exposition. Henderson had already demonstrated his skills as a promoter of aviation shows. When he discovered that Los Angeles had no large permanent exhibition space, he decided to build one and to launch it with the housing exposition. He promoted a design competition among local architects. The winning plans were submitted by plumber Wurdeman and Becket. In little more than 5 months, and at the cost of $1 per square foot, Henderson constructed his answer to the Depression, the Streamline Moderne Pan Pacific Auditorium. The auditorium opened its doors to the public in May 1935. Henderson himself greatly influenced the style of this building. He had come to the Pan Pacific from the world of aviation. The auditorium expressed his love of technology, of speed and flight, and above all, his optimism about the future. The auditorium's architectural style was the style of the machine, the automobile, the train, the airplane, the ocean liner, and the then futuristic Buck Rogers spaceship. When one entered this building, one was supposed to be stepping into the future. Should we pause for a moment and step into the past?
Would you like to be queen for a day?
This building, this place, was the center of Southern California life for over a quarter of a century. The events staged here express so clearly the quality of American life. Relentless pursuit of technology, the fascination for cars and mechanical devices and everyday gadgetry, and the passion for personalities and star-studded entertainment. The Pan was a showcase, for better or for worse, of American civilization. So, small wonder that as events slowed to a trickle or stopped entirely, that the surrounding community began to feel a void.
Back in 1968, the City Planning Commission was authorized to set up planning advisory councils all through the city, composed of citizens. In 1969, Judge, I was appointed to the Wilshire Planning Advisory Council, and we determined after numerous surveys that this would make a perfect site for a park, and secondly, that the Wilshire District was very deficient in parks. We made our recommendations to the City Planning Department, and we were ignored. The City Planning Commission heard a preliminary plan which said that this entire area should be devoted to medium and high-rise housing, which we objected to, and we formed our Citizens to Save the Wilshire District, which developed intensive plans for the development of the Pan Pacific site as a park. Several years later, the City Planning Commission accepted our recommendation, and plans were then put forward for the development of the park, and it's reached its present stage. As you can see, this park is a natural. It gives the city the greatest opportunity to develop a large park for the mass people in the area.
A park plan for the Pan Pacific site emerged only after a lengthy and complicated planning process. Let's take an imaginary ride, follow the park plan through the bureaucratic maze of county, city, state, and federal governments. The ride begins when the Board of Supervisors instructs the County Parks and Recreation Department to study the feasibility of a park on the Pan Pacific Auditorium land. This study becomes the policy basis for all the future county plans for the Pan Pacific Park. It recommends an open space type park with gardens and cultural facilities. The study expresses doubt about the feasibility of using the auditorium in the new park and anticipates its demolition. This study is submitted to the Board of Supervisors, which authorizes the formation of a joint city-county committee to coordinate funding and planning. The search for money is on. Meanwhile, the city produces its own park plan. Noting that a quarter of the city's population lives within 5 miles of the proposed park site, the city recommends a multi-use park. 1/2 active park, 1/3 for open space, and the remainder for special use. The city urges that reuse of the Pan Pacific Auditorium be studied. In its search for funds, the county requests aid of the state legislature. The legislature passes SB 2466, which appropriates $3 billion in state funds as a grant to the city of Los Angeles. However, the governor vetoes this bill. Following this veto, SB 48 is then presented to the legislature, passed and signed into law. SB 48 also appropriates $3 million in state monies for a Pan Pacific Park, but attaches the park to the state park system. Because state parks may not include facilities for active indoor recreational activities, passage of SB 48 means that the Pan Pacific Park will be passive. The county plan now acquires an unexpected patron, the Los Angeles County Flood Control District. Flood Control informs the County Parks Department that it wishes to build a water retention basin on 13 acres of the Pan Pacific property and will contribute $3 million towards acquisition of the land. The district assures county park planners that the water retention basin will harmonize with the park. However, the proposed site for the basin is the site of the Pan Pacific Auditorium. The county now prepares an environmental impact report on its park plan. The EIR states that one of the major impacts of the park development will be the demolition of the Pan Pacific Auditorium. Alarmed by this, a group of concerned citizens nominate the auditorium to the National Register of Historical Places. When the auditorium is accepted on the National Register, the county park plan must undergo federal review process. The county agrees to hire a consultant to study the feasibility of retaining all or part of the Pan Pacific Auditorium in the Pan Pacific Park. The county's agreement with the federal government releases the HUD funds which have been earmarked for the park project. The county now proceeds with the acquisition of the Pan Pacific property from its owners. After a lengthy and complicated negotiating process, the land is sold to the people of California for $10.5 million. Title to the Pan Pacific land has now passed to the people of California. Now all the citizens can roam on it as did the early residents of the Pueblo. But one question yet remains. What shall we do with the Pan Pacific Auditorium that so energetically describes the optimism and entrepreneuring spirit that built our city? 6 alternatives are being considered. Renovate the entire auditorium at an estimated cost of $4 billion. Renovate west section and exhibit area at an estimated cost of $2 million. Preserve the west section on its present site at an estimated cost of $700,000. Preserve the west section and relocate it as the new Pan Pacific Park entrance at an estimated cost of $900,000. Reconstruct the original west section and use it as the park entrance at an estimated cost of $830,000. Build a model of the entire auditorium and display it in an interpretive center at an estimated cost of $50,000. Which alternative would you vote for?